Hey, Adam Hooksema here from ProjectionHub, and in this video, I'm going to be talking through how to acquire a business that has high customer concentration. In particular, how will an SBA lender look at a deal where you have, one or two really big customers, and what are some ways to, mitigate that risk, and how do you still get an SBA loan approved? I'm going to be using an example of a client that I was working with as a kind of a use case here, but every deal is a little bit different, so I'm going to give you some ideas on different approaches that you can take to try to mitigate the risk of customer concentration. One big customer that really means a lot to the business. So before I dive too far in, I am using our acquisition projection template here. We have made this available for free, so in the description of the video below, you can grab this tool. This will be helpful for you if you are looking to secure SBA financing. The SBA requires projections for any acquisition, and so we built this particularly for that. In my background, I was an SBA lender for 12 years and closed over 1,500 loans, and now I own ProjectionHub, and this is what we do: help folks through the SBA process with projections, business planning, and really trying to find a lender who is going to understand what they're trying to accomplish. It's going to be a good fit for them and really tell the story. And so this is an example of what we did in a case with high customer concentration. So we had this client who had one large customer, and we've got this kind of spelled out here, separated out in the financials. There's a large customer that, and I didn't use the exact numbers to kind of protect the specific details of this, but roughly we're talking $2 million a year from one large customer, which represented 26% of total revenue. And if you look at this line of cost of goods sold here, this is cost of goods sold for all the other customer revenue, and that cost of goods sold was 76% of revenue. And then this line was the cost of goods sold for the one large customer. It was 97%. So they only had 3% gross profit margins on this really large customer. So what we were able to, show the bank is that even though this was a really large customer, it actually did not impact the bottom line very much at all. And so what the bank's going to be looking for, they want to see, what's your net income? Are there any add backs? Ultimately, what is the cash flow available for debt service? And they're going to compare that to your proposed annual debt service. So what is your annual loan payment? And we set that in here. So this is a $1.5 million loan on a 10-year term. And so our annual debt service was $237. Now, what we are seeing here on a debt service coverage ratio was 1.8. And typically lenders want to see that as 1.25 or above as kind of a bare minimum. So that means you have $1.25 of cash flow for every dollar of debt service. So in this case, what we were able to do, because the lender was getting nervous, they're saying, oh, if you lose this customer, you're not going to have sufficient cash flow to repay the debt. So what we said is, well, let's take this out. Let's take the large customer out. So we'll remove them from revenue, and we'll also remove their cost of goods sold, right? And when we did that, we still had sufficient cash flow. It's still, all 3 years was above the 1.25 debt service coverage ratio. And so, we were able to get the lender comfortable that, actually, yeah, this is a big customer, but they're not that important. They don't actually impact cash flow much at all. And this is also assuming that no other expenses go down. When you lose that customer, there's probably going to be some other operating expenses that go away. And, you may end up actually having better cash flow if you didn't have that big customer at all. Now, that's a unique case. Sometimes there are situations where there is customer concentration and the big customer is really important. Maybe they are very material to the cash flow of the business. And that's where you have to get more creative with how you're going to structure a deal. So typically what I see in those situations then is we're trying to isolate that one or two big customers and then do something with a contingent or forgivable seller note. So, maybe in this case, the purchase price was 1.5. Well, maybe the SBA lender's okay doing $1 million just based on the business with all the other customers. And then maybe there is a seller note for the other 500,000 right? And maybe the terms of that are tied to you owe on that seller note if you retain the customer. So if that big customer goes away, the debt on the seller note is no longer owed to the seller. So that's a way to mitigate, from the SBA lender perspective, really large customer concentration issues. So that's the most common approach, I would say. If you can't make the case that, hey, we can cash flow without this big customer, then you're probably going to be looking at how to mitigate it with a forgivable or contingent seller note. So yeah, if you have questions about that or want to see, how do you model that? How would you review that as a lender in your particular situation? Because every customer concentration deal that I look at is a little bit different. And so yeah, feel free to reach out. Happy to talk through your particular deal. You can reach out directly to me through our support@projectionhub.com email. And again, we'll put in the description of the video below access to our email, as well as a link to this template so you can use that for free for your deal. All right, hope that's been helpful. Thanks.